Welcome to the voice of St. Anthony Parish from Allston, Massachusetts, right here on WROL 950 AM 100.3 FM. And you can also hear us at CatholicAudiomedia.com. That's CatholicAudiomedia.com, where you can check out our website, check out the archives of the show, check out our Substack newsletter. You can check out all kinds of things over there at CatholicAudiomedia.com. Well, we're talking this week about a column that Dennis Prager wrote last week where he talks about having a phone call from, of course, he's a talk show host, so he gets these calls. That's part of what he does. And his opinion page from last week says, "You are a scientist, so what?" And his basic point is this whole thing, say, yes, but I am who I am, and basically you should listen to me because obviously I know better than you do. And his whole reaction is no. And what I talked to you about yesterday is having Tourette syndrome. My neurologist at the time spoke to me and said, well, he used to speak to me all the time. It wasn't anything unusual, but he said to me, my neurologist at the time said to me, one of the things that's important to realize is people who have as he called a disease. I don't like to call this a disease or a disability, and it's absolutely not at this point. But even when it was in full manifestation, I didn't consider it a disability. I just had to deal with it. But this disability, so to speak, he says people who have this know more about it than the doctors who study it because they have it 24/7. And that's one of the reasons why, and this is so important, if you have whether you've been recently diagnosed or any kind of condition, I'm not just talking Tourette syndrome, anything, any kind of condition out there, then what you need to do is get in touch with the support groups. And if you're working with someone who has that condition, it's good to connect with those support groups. Why? Because the people who are connected to those support groups know more about the condition than even the doctors who study it. That's so important. But as Dennis says, you've got this attitude in our society, and I noticed this a long time ago, where I'm a scientist or I've got this. Do you realize, here's something to understand. A grandmother of, we'll say, 5 children who will come up with 15 grandchildren will not be considered an expert on how to be a grandmother who is, we'll say she's 60 years old. Whereas a person who has a PhD in child psychology and is 25 years old will be an expert. You'll see that all the time. Whereas now we have as our special expert, Billy Joe Smith, who is a doctor in child psychology from, whatever university, and you find out he's like 25 years old, even 30 years old. And I always say he is considered a greater expert than the grandmother who has raised 5 children and other grandchildren. And so you kind of look at that and go, sorry, there's another take in there. He's not saying anything he said should be discounted, but don't discount the grandmother either. And this is a reality. So going back to what I was saying about Tourette syndrome, yeah, the people who live this 24/7 understand that. Now, Dennis Prager's argument is over the way COVID was treated and everything else, and the science community coming in and saying, follow the science. And people are coming out and saying, yeah, but people's lives are being affected negatively by following the science. There must be another thing. And at that point, we have to be careful of black and white thinking. Either follow the science or not. But we have to look at the full picture. Yes, the science is important, but how we use the science to touch other people's lives is important as well, and how we respond. Otherwise, it becomes very tyrannical. And now you come back to every so often you deal with this on all sides. This is one of the reasons why we have this radio program here, you're welcome to come to St. Anthony Parish in Allston, Massachusetts. But you notice I'm not on Catholic radio. And there are several reasons for that. One of them is it's a closed system. In order for me to be on Catholic radio, I have to be approved, and I have to match their vision. Well, one of the things you will hear on Catholic radio is we don't have to respond to any bishop. I have problems with that because I have to respond to Cardinal O'Malley. So if I say something you don't like, you can always write to the Archdiocese, and they can always contact me and say, "Oh, we got a little problem with what you're saying here." There's someone I'm accountable to, and that's important because it's important for people to know that. So there's someone I'm accountable to. But the other side of the fence is when you have someone who says, "I am a priest, you have to do what I say." Wait a minute. You are a priest who is helping me with Catholic teaching, but you're helping me incorporate it into my life in such a way that I may draw closer to Christ. It doesn't give you the right to be a tyrant. And that's so important. And that simple teaching, you might say, well, if that's, I don't know if we should follow that. You will find that from the saints all the way back to the early days. I'm going to talk about that on the other side of the break. You're listening to the voice of St. Anthony Parish from Allston, Massachusetts, right here on WROL, 950 AM, 100.3 FM, and you can also hear us at CatholicAudiomedia.com. I want to call your attention to Catholic TV, which offers great faith-filled, family-friendly programming 24 hours a day. You can find your cable channel at www.getcatholictv.com, and you can watch online on the free apps or check out the YouTube channel. Daily Mass, Rosaries, the Divine Mercy Chaplet, and the Our Lady of Perpetual Help Novena are all available online and on demand. Check out CatholicTV.com. And don't forget our own website, CatholicAudiomedia.com. That's CatholicAudiomedia.com. You can check out the website, check out the archives of the show. Send us questions or suggestions of the program if you have any questions. People occasionally call me up. They tell me, what they think. Usually they are alienated from the Catholic Church, and they're telling me why. What happened with, for example, someone called me up and said that they come from a family that the parents were divorced, and people in the church looked down upon her. And how tragic that is that people would treat her like that. And of course, as a young child, I don't know if you know this, it's very common. All right, yes, you get this from child psychologists who may be 25 years old and have PhD in child psychology. But what they will tell you is, if a child, at a child's level, if the parents divorce, the child will blame themselves. I'm the reason why they divorced, not understanding that is not true. So that obviously a terrible, traumatic thing. So, if you have any questions, comments, whatever, feel free to contact us. A lot of people contact us through the parish. So we're at stanthonyalston.org. So anyway, a powerful thing that happened was what Dennis is talking about. And I had said towards the end of his column, he talked about, the same principle where, you're a scientist, so what? Applies to priests and pastors and rabbis and journalists, and I forget all the list. And yes, let me tell you, I come from the, obviously I was born and brought up in Weymouth, so I come from the, what do you call it, the American system. But I'm very much connected with the Latino church. And in the Latino church, there are so few priests, it's extremely lay-driven, very lay-driven. And so the lay community has that that very powerful dynamic. And I'm trying to always teach this to the American community, the North American community, as the South Americans will say. And I'm always trying to teach that because it's a very powerful dynamic that really builds dynamic parishes. When we understand a church that is not lay driven per se, but that works very closely with the priest and the lay community. And I've always said, first of all, especially the Hispanic community is run by what were known as servidores, which are kind of Well, they're leaders in the community, and they basically run the church and they work with the priest. If a priest doesn't understand that and he walks into the parish and says, I am the priest and you'll do what I say, I always, jokingly, but there is quite truth in that, I always say, you'll last about 6 weeks. Because you don't do that with the Latino community. You can walk into a North American community and say, I am the priest, and you will do what I say. It should not be like that, but you can do that, and people will just kind of, all right, and walk away. But what you really need is the dynamic. And this is what Pope Francis is trying to set up. And interesting about Dennis Prager doesn't necessarily agree with Pope Francis. But Pope Francis is trying to bring that same South American dynamic to the whole church, that understanding that all of us have the Holy Spirit as per our baptism and confirmation. St. John Chrysostom said, you received the same Holy Spirit as the apostles did on Pentecost. That's what St. John Chrysostom said. So all of us receive that. So all of us have this ability to work together to bring the message of the gospel to the world. The minute I come up with my idea, I am the priest and you'll do what I say, that's a problem. Now, what I will say is, well, this is what the church teaches, and let's work to get where the church teaches. But I'm not going to turn around and say, I'm the priest, you do what I say, and laugh you out of the church. That's not right. That is so wrong, although it's been known to happen. And that's what Dennis Prager is talking about. These people who come up and say, I am the priest, you will do what I say, this is who you will vote for, this is what you will say, this is... No. And we've got to realize that whole spirit of the Holy Spirit within us. And basically, Dennis Prager is, I don't know if he realizes, is touching on that in his column, that same dynamic across the board. Have a blessed day. If you would like to support our program, please consider a donation to St. Anthony Parish in Allston, Massachusetts. There are several ways to consider this. One is to purchase any of our merchandise, which you can find at the shopping tab at CatholicAudiomedia.com. That's CatholicAudiomedia.com. There are coffee mugs there. There's also my latest book, Encounter Christ in Your Humanity, all of which you can find at the shopping tab at CatholicAudiomedia.com. You can also donate to the show directly through either the Donate tab, also at CatholicAudiomedia.com, or by sending a donation through the U.S. Postal Service with your questions and comments at 43 Holton Street, Allston, Massachusetts, 02134. That's St. Anthony Parish, 43 Holton Street, Allston, Massachusetts, 02134. Finally, the best way you can support our parish is to attend Mass on Sundays at 10 o'clock and be a part of our parish. We thank you for any support you would like to give to St. Anthony Parish in Allston, Massachusetts, the sponsoring parish for this media outreach to Catholics and other Christians in the WROL, WEZE, and podcast listening audience. We'll talk tomorrow. We're going to talk about something that Pope Francis did that people have been asking for quite some time. We'll talk about that tomorrow. In Cristo vivimos.